For those of you that I haven't met before, Steve Pucelik, product manager on the SharePoint Embedded team, and thrilled to walk through some of the Power Platform connectors that we are introducing here shortly. For those of you that are fairly new to SharePoint Embedded, a couple reminders on how it is, what it is, how to use it, and where it fits into the Power Platform. It is an API-only version of SharePoint, so think of your application, your Power App, your Power Pages, custom app that needs to store documents somewhere. SharePoint Embedded is that place to store scalable documents and get all of the goodness that you would want in your M365 environment. The way that it does that is there is that partition that's in your M365 tenant. So once you set up SharePoint Embedded in your tenant, you now have the ability to use the Graph API to get into those SharePoint Embedded containers. Think of a container as a site collection with one document library, because that's exactly what it is. Scales to what you think it does from millions of documents, have millions of containers that can store that per your application. So scalability, like I tell people, we have figured that out a long time ago. Core features that you want to use within your application, these are plenty and robust. So the things that we see the most are the collaboration. I want to edit an Excel document in Excel in the browser or the desktop. Great. Don't make me download it. Don't make me re-upload it in my application. This is a great thing, right? Other things that we normally see, compliance, full integration with that M365 environment that you have, E3, E5, whatever you want to focus on there. You build it, we provide the backend to support that. So think of the UX. We're going to look at a Power App here in just a second. We're going to look at Copilot agents, Copilot Pages agents, so that you can build that UX however you want to. You control that user experience. You control how the files are handled and so forth. We take care of everything else. You're going to authenticate through Entra. You're going to use eDiscovery. You're going to document or collaborate on documents. You're going to do all of that natively within a lot of the applications that you're building, but you don't have to build it. That's the beauty of it. So where does Power Platform fit into this? Power Platform, obviously built on the Connector framework. In the past, you have, since SharePoint Embedded is graph-driven, you have had the ability to use the HTTP endpoint to make all those graph calls. Not anymore. That's where we're starting to use first-party connectors. So we're introducing some first-party connectors that go directly to SharePoint Embedded. You don't have to pay for the premium connector in the HTTP connector. All of the charges and so forth, they're just normal consumption charges that you have within SharePoint Embedded, but use that wherever you want to. Like Vesa said, in Copilot Studio, if you're creating agents and you want to have a tool that interacts with your agent, use the connector. You're using Power Automate to trigger based on a file that's been added to a SharePoint Embedded container. There's a trigger for that. Building a Power App, connecting it to the application, displaying the files that you need to, using Power Pages externally, all of that can now be used within those first-party connectors that we are coming out with. There are 47 activities within those connectors. So think of all the CRUD operations that you normally do. Create, read, update, delete, all is good. You can incorporate that into the pay-as-you-go subscription that you already have in your environment, and everything works just fine. Okay, so let's take a look and see what this guy looks like. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to go over to a Power App that I have. And for those of you that know me, I am a go live or go home kind of person. And yes, you can see the dancing dots on the top of my screen, and they keep dancing and dancing. But what we're going to do is we're going to work through what it is that's going on underneath that particular application. So within my Power App, I have a normal data grid that I want to display information on, right? So if I go to that data grid, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on that container itself. And where's she at here? Yeah. The container. And you'll notice that I have a collection of containers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call that endpoint, and I'm going to get all of the container information that I want from my application. Okay, so if I go to the welcome screen, let's see here. As soon as I fire the application up, that's where I have the ability to go and make that initial call. So what I'm doing is within my Power App, I'm going and I am doing nothing more than filling a collection with the results of the Power Automate flow called Get Containers. And naturally, what you would think that would do is it would make that endpoint connection. So if I go to Power Automate and I look at what is going on in the background, pretty simple stuff. Within my Power App, I'm passing in or I'm activating that activity, but then I'm calling this new Power or SharePoint Embedded connector called List Containers. And if we look at the parameters that go in there, it's simply telling me for my application what is the container type ID. So for those of you that are, veterans of SharePoint Embedded, when you create a SharePoint Embedded environment, you're going to have this concept called container type. And that is where we're going to store all of our containers. So think of that as a collection of containers, if you will. And that's exactly what I want to get. I want to get back all of the containers that I have in my application so I can show that to the users, security trimmed, of course, and they can start to navigate through the files that are in that container. But if I wanted to add a new connector, so you'll notice that now we have the ability to look at SharePoint Embedded. And once these are released, again, you have all of the CRUD operations that you would expect. If you wanted to create a file, create a folder, delete a file, get the versions, add permissions, on and on, you certainly have the ability to do that through the connectors that we are making available. Okay, so add those into your flow within Power Automate, do with it what you need to do, all is good there. Okay, so that's going to return on a JSON response. All we're doing is simply parsing that JSON response, putting it into our container, and then binding that container to objects in Power Apps. Nothing out of the ordinary here, and something that we normally see from a application perspective. Okay. So now that we have all the containers, we need to get files. So this is where we have the ability to go and select that container. If that were returning my containers, that would populate with all my containers. But what we're going to do is now that we're navigating into files, I want to be able to list the files that are in that container. So one of the parameters that it's going to require for me to get all of the files that are in that container, what container am I in? So each container naturally has a container ID. That is what the Power Automate endpoint is looking for. Give me the container ID. If you want to return specific fields that are in there, great. If you want to have all the fields come back so that you can use that within your application, all is well. But this is pretty simple. Tricky part here is where exactly am I in my tree or my folder structure? Am I at the root, which I am here? First time in, get me all the folders and files at the root level. If I'm going and traversing the tree, I'm walking up and down the tree, now I need to know exactly where I'm at. Send in the folder ID. Now I can get the files from that folder. So you can imagine that you've got a container that's got 1 million documents in it. Getting 1 million documents back out is probably going to be a performance hit. So you're going to walk up and down that tree and select the folders, the contents of the folder, display the files, and so forth as you're doing that. Nothing different here. Calling that list, again, returning back that JSON response, populating a collection, and then using that within your application. Okay. Last thing I want to show you before we jump over to Copilot Studio is not only do we have the ability to monitor those or react to those events that are happening in your application, we can now monitor file changes. Okay, so now somebody drops a document into a container, you want to be able to do something with that. Set up the trigger and determine what container you want to monitor. Yes, that's really a container ID. Lovely. And now when that event happens, it will initialize that variable. You'll get back content from that particular event. So you'll get items like let's just go in and look at that. Oops. Right? So you'll be able to get back what's the URL, what's the ID of the file that made that event, what's the name of the file, the size, the web URLs. So once you have the ID of the file that has been added or modified within that container, now you're home free. Go and do file activity, create a workflow. Obviously, you're going to maybe create an approval workflow, or you're going to do some disposition with the file, whatever you need to within Power Automate. Absolutely do that. But now we have the ability to monitor those files as they're being uploaded, changed, and so forth. Okay. All right. From a Power Apps and Power Automate perspective, all is good there. So let's go over to Copilot Studio. So now we're going to extend that connector framework a little bit further. And within my Copilot Studio environment, I have an agent. And if I go into that particular agent, I have a certain amount of topics that I've created. One of the topics that I've modified is going in. I'm going to simply ask the user for a couple prompts if I wanted to upload an invoice, so forth. But then I've also added a new topic called the upload file to SharePoint Embedded. And what this will do is first we need to ask the agent to upload the file. So we're going to prompt the user to upload the file. A couple of things that are of note here, and ask me how I know this. Go in and check that include file metadata. That is going to be your friend here in just a second. And then you'll be able to get not only file content, but the name, the content type. This is going to be like super incredibly useful here in just a second. Okay. So once we have that question prompted to the user, I'm simply throwing out a message that says, hey, here's the file name. Now the action. So what I'm doing with the action is I'm actually going to take that file, pass it into my tool that I created. We'll get to that here in a second. But this is the content bytes or the JSON that we're going to use to pass that file into my tool. So now this is going to be important because we want the content bytes and we want the name based on what the user had uploaded for us. But if we go and we view the details of that upload file, I just happen to have it right here. When the agent calls the flow, we have a parameter that takes the file that they just dropped into the chat window, and we're going to convert that to a base 64 binary. But then we're going to call that SharePoint Embedded action. Once we call that SharePoint Embedded action, this is where we're going to create the file. Nothing different than when we created a file in Power Automate. Obviously, this is, Power Automate. Pass in the container ID. You'll notice I've hard-coded this in here, but there may be an environment variable or something that you want to include in there. But you can also add in the file content based on the parameter that came from the agent. So when the agent is called, that's when you're going to get the content bytes and the name. Those are the two parameters SharePoint Embedded looks for so that it can add the file to the container, and all is well there. Okay? So once we have that, we're going to publish the agent back out. We're going to save that topic. And then I'm just simply displaying a message to the user that says everything is good to go there. Okay? So when I start to fire that agent and test it, I'm going to have a prompt, and you'll see what would you like to do? I have a couple prompts that are automatically set for the user. Simply uploading the file. I'm going to grab myself a file, and let's grab that guy, and we're going to open that, and up it goes. So now that is going to display the name of the file, and it's being uploaded to SharePoint Embedded. So now that tool has activated. The agent is now uploading the file into the container, and that is going to be added to my SharePoint Embedded environment. So as you can see, we have a lot of different flexibility with the agents themselves. Pop that over here, go back in the screen. So a couple things that we saw when we went through the demo from a SharePoint Embedded perspective, we are authenticating against Entra. So know that Entra and all of the configuration that you have, conditional access, PIM, multi-factor authentication, all of that is certainly in play. The Power Automate connectors. So naturally, the connectors that we're using within not only Copilot Studio, but within a Power App are full, easy to use. Again, not a premium connector. They are native first-party connectors that are in the environment and so forth. Use them within the objects that you normally used to. If you're familiar with how to parse a JSON file and put it into a collection, nothing changes. Okay, so all of that is still going to be business as usual as you're working through your Power App application, because that is the response that SharePoint Embedded is going to give you. Always going to be that JSON response. And we take a look at some of the document management capabilities and the ability for collaboration on those documents that are in SharePoint Embedded. Okay.